Summary of Wiser, Getting Beyond Groupthink to Make Groups Smarter by Sunstein and Reid Hastie. Part 1 Overview. Whether it's families, companies, or countries, we like to work out differences with group deliberation to reach optimal solutions. However, this book argues that resolving differences is an illusion and that groups suppress private information held by individuals, forcing them to make decisions based on shared information. In addition, a best decision is also an illusion because group negotiation not only fails to correct individual mistakes but magnifies them and creates blind confidence in the group's conclusions. Sunstein and Hastie provide an insightful overview of group decision-making dynamics, drawing from extensive research and real-world examples. They argue that while groups have the potential to be wiser than individuals, they often fall short due to various psychological and social factors. The authors begin by painting a picture of the modern workplace, where team-based decision-making is ubiquitous. From corporate boardrooms to government agencies, groups are tasked with making critical choices that affect countless lives. However, Sunstein and Hastie point out that simply bringing smart people together doesn't guarantee smart outcomes. To illustrate this, they recount the story of the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. President John F. Kennedy assembled a team of brilliant advisors to plan an operation to overthrow Fidel Castro's regime in Cuba. Despite the collective intelligence and experience in the room, the resulting plan was a disastrous failure. This example serves as a stark reminder that even highly qualified groups can make catastrophic decisions. The authors explain that groups often amplify individual biases rather than mitigating them. They introduce the concept of happy talk, where group members engage in overly optimistic discussions that fail to critically examine potential pitfalls. This phenomenon was evident in the lead-up to the 2008 financial crisis, where many financial institutions collectively underestimated the risks of subprime mortgages. Sunstein and Hastie also highlight the danger of conformity in groups. They discuss Solomon Asch's famous conformity experiments, where participants often gave incorrect answers to simple visual tasks just to agree with the group consensus. The authors argue that this tendency towards conformity can stifle dissent and lead to poor decisions in real-world scenarios, such as in corporate strategy meetings or political policy discussions. However, the book isn't all doom and gloom. The authors stress that groups can indeed be wiser than individuals when structured correctly. They point to examples like Wikipedia, where a diverse group of contributors has created a vast and largely accurate encyclopedia. They also discuss how companies like Google have implemented structured decision-making processes that encourage diverse viewpoints and critical analysis. Throughout the overview, Sunstein and Hastie emphasize that the key to wise group decisions lies in understanding and actively counteracting the psychological pitfalls that plague collective thinking. They set the stage for the rest of the book, which delves deeper into specific problems and solutions in group decision-making. By weaving together academic research, historical events, and contemporary examples, the authors create a compelling narrative that underscores the importance of improving group decision-making in our increasingly complex and interconnected world. Their overview serves as a wake-up call for leaders and team members alike, challenging readers to reflect on their own group dynamics and consider how they might be made wiser. Part 2 What Makes Group Deliberations Fail? The authors dedicate significant attention to exploring the factors that lead to failures in group deliberations. They argue that understanding these pitfalls is crucial for improving collective decision-making processes. One of the primary issues they identify is the phenomenon of hidden profiles. This occurs when crucial information is unevenly distributed among group members, leading to suboptimal decisions. The authors illustrate this concept with a study conducted in a business school setting. Students were divided into groups and tasked with selecting the best candidate for a job. Each member was given different pieces of information about the candidates, but the full picture would only emerge if all information was shared. Surprisingly, most groups failed to select the objectively best candidate because they didn't effectively pool their individual knowledge. Another critical factor in group failure is what the authors term cascades. This occurs when group members follow the opinions of others without critically evaluating the information themselves. A real-world example of this is the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster in 2003. During the launch, some engineers noticed potential damage to the shuttle's heat shield but didn't voice their concerns forcefully because senior managers seemed unconcerned. This cascade of silence ultimately contributed to the tragedy. Sunstein and Hastie also highlight the danger of group polarization. This is the tendency for groups to adopt more extreme positions than the initial inclinations of their members. They point to the phenomenon of echo chambers in social media and online forums, where like-minded individuals reinforce and amplify each other's views. This can lead to radicalization and the rejection of alternative perspectives, as seen in various political and ideological movements. The authors discuss how social pressures within groups can lead to conformity and the suppression of dissent. They revisit Irving Janis's concept of groupthink, using the example of the Kennedy administration's decision-making during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Initially, the group was leaning towards a military strike, but fortunately, Kennedy intentionally absented himself from some meetings to encourage more open discussion, ultimately leading to a diplomatic resolution. Another factor contributing to group failure is the common knowledge effect. Groups tend to focus on information that all members share, often ignoring unique information held by individuals. The authors describe a study where groups were tasked with solving a murder mystery. Each member had some shared information and some unique clues. Most groups focused on the shared information and failed to solve the mystery, illustrating how this effect can lead to poor decisions. Sunstein and Hastie also explore how group dynamics can amplify individual cognitive biases. For instance, they discuss how the overconfidence bias, our tendency to overestimate our abilities and knowledge, can be exacerbated in group settings. They cite examples from the business world, such as the AOL-Time Warner merger, where overconfidence in synergies and future performance led to one of the largest merger failures in corporate history. The authors emphasize that these failures are not inevitable. They argue that by understanding these pitfalls, we can design better processes for group decision-making. They point to successful examples, such as Google's approach to meetings, where they assign specific roles like devil's advocate to counteract groupthink and encourage critical analysis. Throughout this section, Sunstein and Hastie weave together academic research, historical events, and contemporary case studies to paint a comprehensive picture of why groups often fail to reach wise decisions. Their narrative serves as both a warning and a call to action, urging readers to be vigilant about these common pitfalls in their own group interactions and to actively work towards creating environments that foster truly effective collective intelligence. Part 3: How to create more successful team decisions. One key recommendation is to actively promote diversity within teams. The authors argue that cognitive diversity, different ways of thinking and problem solving, is crucial for high-quality decisions. They cite the success of Netflix's culture of candor and debate. Reid Hastie, Netflix's co-founder, intentionally cultivated an environment where employees at all levels are encouraged to voice dissenting opinions and challenge assumptions. This approach has contributed to Netflix's ability to innovate and adapt in the rapidly changing entertainment industry. Sunstein and Hastie also emphasized the importance of structured information sharing. They introduced the concept of priming group discussions by having members write down their thoughts independently before the group conversation begins. This technique was effectively used by the intelligence community after the failures leading up to the Iraq War. Analysts are now required to articulate their individual assessments before group discussions, reducing the risk of information cascades and groupthink. The authors advocate for the use of specific roles within team discussions. One such role is the devil's advocate, whose job is to actively challenge the group's prevailing opinions. They describe how Andy Grove, former CEO of Intel, would often play this role himself, pushing his team to critically examine their assumptions. This approach was instrumental in Intel's decision to shift focus from memory chips to microprocessors in the 1980s, a move that proved crucial to the company's long-term success. Another strategy proposed is the pre-mortem technique. This involves imagining that a project has failed and then working backward to determine what could have led to the failure. The authors share how the global design firm IDEO uses this method in their project planning. By encouraging team members to envision potential failures, IDEO has been able to identify and address risks early in the design process, leading to more successful product launches. Sunstein and Hastie also discuss the importance of anonymity in certain decision-making contexts. They describe how some companies use anonymous voting systems for sensitive decisions to reduce social pressures and encourage honest feedback. For instance, they mention how some tech companies use anonymous feedback tools to evaluate project ideas, allowing employees to voice concerns without fear of repercussion. The book emphasizes the value of iterative decision-making processes. The authors point to Amazon's approach of making reversible decisions quickly and adjusting course based on new information. Jeff Bezos has referred to this as disagree and commit, where team members can voice disagreement but ultimately rally behind a decision for quick implementation and learning. Sunstein and Hastie also advocate for creating a culture of psychological safety, where team members feel comfortable expressing doubts and admitting mistakes. They highlight Google's Project Aristotle, which identified psychological safety as the most important factor in high-performing teams. Google has since implemented practices to foster this safety, such as leaders openly admitting their own mistakes and uncertainties. The authors stress the importance of proper information aggregation. They discuss prediction markets and other tools that can effectively combine diverse opinions. They cite how companies like Google and Ford have used internal prediction markets to forecast project completion dates and sales figures more accurately than traditional methods. Throughout this section, Sunstein and Hastie provide a blend of theoretical frameworks and practical examples. They show how organizations ranging from tech giants to government agencies have implemented these strategies to improve their decision-making processes. The authors paint a picture of what's possible when teams are structured to bring out the best in each member and to effectively combine diverse perspectives. By offering these concrete strategies and real-world success stories, Sunstein and Hastie provide a roadmap for leaders and team members alike to transform their group dynamics. Their narrative underscores that while the challenges of group decision-making are significant, they are not insurmountable. With the right approaches, teams can indeed become wiser than the sum of their parts. Part 4 Conclusion. The authors begin by revisiting the central premise of their book, that groups have the potential to be wiser than individuals, but this potential is often unrealized due to various psychological and social factors. They remind readers of the key pitfalls they've discussed throughout the book, such as groupthink, information cascades, and hidden profiles. However, their tone is ultimately optimistic, emphasizing that understanding these challenges is the first step towards overcoming them. Sunstein and Hastie use the analogy of a symphony orchestra to illustrate their vision of ideal group decision-making. They describe how an orchestra, composed of diverse instruments and musicians, can create beautiful music when properly coordinated. Similarly, they argue, a well-structured group can produce decisions that are far superior to what any individual member could achieve alone. The authors revisit some of the success stories they've shared throughout the book to reinforce their points. They remind readers of how companies like Google have implemented structured decision-making processes that encourage diverse viewpoints and critical analysis. They also recall the example of Wikipedia, where a large, diverse group of contributors has created a vast and largely accurate encyclopedia. These examples serve to illustrate that effective group decision-making is not just a theoretical possibility, but a practical reality in various contexts. Sunstein and Hastie then turn their attention to the future, discussing how emerging technologies might further transform group decision-making. They explore the potential of artificial intelligence and machine learning to complement human decision-making processes. For instance, they mention how some companies are using AI to analyze patterns in group discussions and highlight potential blind spots or biases that human participants might miss. The authors also address the growing importance of remote and distributed decision-making in an increasingly globalized world. They discuss how companies like Automatic, the company behind WordPress, have successfully implemented fully remote work cultures that foster effective collaboration and decision-making across time zones and cultures. This example serves to illustrate that the principles of wise group decision-making can be applied even in non-traditional work environments. Sunstein and Hastie conclude by calling on readers to become active participants in improving group decision-making in their own contexts. They emphasize that creating wiser groups is not just the responsibility of formal leaders, but of every group member. They encourage readers to be mindful of the pitfalls they've discussed and to actively implement the strategies they've suggested. The authors end with a powerful real-world example that encapsulates many of the book's key lessons. They describe how, in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, regulators and financial institutions around the world came together to reform the global financial system. This process involved diverse stakeholders, structured information sharing, and the active consideration of dissenting views. While not perfect, this collaborative effort led to significant improvements in financial regulation and stability, demonstrating the potential of wise group decision-making to address even the most complex global challenges. In their final paragraphs, Sunstein and Hastie strike a note of cautious optimism. They acknowledge that creating truly wise groups is an ongoing challenge, but express confidence that by applying the insights from their book, we can make significant progress. They leave readers with a call to action, urging them to strive for wiser decision-making in their own groups and organizations, and thus contribute to a more thoughtful and effective society as a whole. Through this conclusion, Sunstein and Hastie effectively tie together the various elements of their book, reinforcing their key messages and providing readers with a clear vision of how to move forward. Their narrative not only summarizes the book's content but also inspires readers to actively engage with its ideas in their own lives and work. Thank you for listening. I hope this content is useful to you. If you like this kind of content, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to support our team.